G'day, ZiggyD here, and let's take a look at some of the new Path of Exile uniques. Patch 0.11.6 brought with it 4 new uniques, and 2 of them are specifically trap ones, and the other 2 are pretty interesting looking as well. So let's kick things off with one of the new trap uniques, Sunblast Cloth Belt. Now this new unique comes with a cool little poem down the bottom. The sun's fury trapped in pillars of blazing light explodes from its cage. And it's pretty cool stuff. So it comes on the base cloth belt, which just increases block and stun recovery. So just a bit of extra defensive bonus there. Unfortunately, not a life one, but this means it's still going to be pretty good on ES base trap builds, but also still decent on life ones as well. The first mod is 33% increased trap damage, which is pretty huge, and often considering the fact that there's very limited ways to buff certain traps like bear trap, having an increased trap damage mod that high, 33%, is pretty insane. So it's a pretty huge buff right there on the first one, and honestly, probably makes it worth using for a lot of trap builds, but the other mods, you know, they extend things out a little bit further. Next up, we have some mana regeneration. Some trap builds can get quite pricey in terms of mana, like for example, the trap build that I'm creating at the moment uses Eldritch Battery, so I can spam out a lot of multi-trap, lightning traps and fire traps and things like that. And because that can be a little bit hard to keep up with, a bit of increased mana regeneration never goes astray. 20% fire resist is just not bad. It's just kind of part of the theming of the item, I feel, but still obviously resistance is always good. And when you're trying to kit up with these utility sorts of uniques, getting a bit of extra resists and life and things like that is always good to get on those, because you often have to sacrifice a lot of those pure defensive stats to be able to use these utility items, so having a little bit on there is a bit nice as well. Next up, 80% reduced trap duration. Now this is where things start to get interesting, and this item starts to, you know, show its kind of its real unique stats. I guess I would have to say, even though it's a unique item. But that kind of comes into play when we look at the final mod. But first, I just want to take a look at this one. 25% increased light radius. That's cool. That's cool. You can use it on a low life build to counteract the low life light reduction, or just to make things a little bit more shiny. Again, this really comes in line with the theming of this particular item, Sunblast. We've got the fire resist, and we've got the increased light radius, and a lot of builds that are going to be using this are going to be using fire trap as well, so that's pretty nice. But okay, now here's the final one. Traps trigger at the end of their duration. Now, combined with the 80% reduced trap duration, this means that traps stay down for, I think it's either 3 or 6 seconds, but it's not very long. So basically you throw them down, and then after 3 or 6 seconds, so the 80% reduced duration, obviously that's going to go up if you have picked up any increased duration, but I actually don't think that's necessary. They trigger straight away then. Now this isn't actually a drawback, I would say. A lot of uniques come with drawbacks, and I wouldn't say that this is a drawback. Only in certain cases where you're trying to set up traps and then draw an enemy onto them, it might be a bit of a drawback then, but overall it's not really much of a drawback. Now it has been confirmed that traps will still trigger normally, so if you throw them directly at a mob, they'll still trigger normally, and you're getting all of that increased damage, and the reduced duration and traps triggering at the end of their duration is no, not an issue essentially. But it's all around, it's a pretty nice belt, an essential item I think for most trappers just because of that damage, and I can't really think of any other significant belts that you could put in the any items that you could put in the belt slot that would really benefit a trap specific build. So obviously pretty good stuff for the trappers, and as I said, this is the Path of Traps patch here. Anyway, next one, Deerstalker Deerskin Boots. Another trap-specific item here. We have anticipation, preparation, exhilaration, celebration. That's really fun to say over and over again. Try and say it 10 times really fast. But gems in this item are supported by level 11 trap. Now that means if you have a 4-link pair of these boots, you're essentially getting a 5-link for the purposes of creating a trap. So that means you can stick in some sort of one of your utility traps in there, or one of your damage dealing traps, and have a 5-link trap there, which is always pretty nice. And you can use like a 3-link dagger and a 3-link shield, or 2 daggers or something like that, and still have a second 5-link as well, and then you can have the 6-link on your chest. So that's pretty good, and you know, kind of an essential. I don't really think there's any other trap items like that in the game at the moment, so that's pretty cool stuff. I increased evasion rating and maximum life. It's nice to finally start getting some life on unique. So as I said, same idea with the fire resist on the previous item, having a bit of life on there means that there's not too many drawbacks to actually using this item. It's something you can incorporate into your build, even in conjunction with the other belt, and still have your character be reasonably survivable. So 38 isn't huge, but it's still nice to have a little bit on there. Not sure what the range on that is. The next stat is 18% increased trap throwing speed, and combined with the 30% increased movement speed for 9 seconds on throwing a trap, these are go fast trapper boots. Pretty exciting, and I'm super keen to incorporate these into my build because I like the idea of really quickly throwing down these traps, like spamming them out, having a ton of mana to be able to do that, and then quickly sprinting to the next pack. Now 30% increased move speed for 9 seconds is huge. That's more than enough time to get yourself from pack to pack. Essentially, throw down all of your traps, everything dies, you pretty much are gone before they're even dead. By the time they hit the ground, you'll be at the next pack already. So that's pretty exciting. And the increased trap throwing speed obviously sinks in with that pretty well. So you're throwing down those traps significantly faster. 18% is pretty large. It's about almost 2 passives on the passives tree. And 30% increased move speed is obviously huge. So another great item for trappers. I'll be using both of these 2 new trap items on my new trap build that I'm working on. And if that build turns out good, I'll bring you guys a video on that. But let's look at some of the non-trap ones. So I believe both of these were designed by Grinding Gear Games specifically for this trap patch, and that kind of makes a lot of sense. But the next one here we have is Lightning Coil Desert Brigadine. There's nothing like imminent death to galvanize one's purpose in life. And a while back, Chris announced that one of the new uniques coming in this patch would redefine the way we think about endgame survivability and defense, and he said offense as well, but I don't really see that happening. I guess because of the lightning damage on there. But the theming of this item straight up is super cool. Look at the artwork on this. It's called Lightning Coil, and you kind of have like these lightning things there, attracting metal bits, attracting lightning, and you have the leather to block the lightning from hitting you, I guess. But it functions pretty interestingly, and actually I think is a very powerful item. First up, 1 to 30 lightning damage on a defensive piece of gear is pretty significant. Now we have boots, gloves, and chest piece that all give you this flat lightning damage bonus. It's huge. I don't know why we keep getting all of these lightning damage armor pieces, but decking yourself out in a bunch of these means you can get quite high lightning damage on attacks. We have increased armor and evasion, not a big deal. Life, very good. So combined with pretty high armor and evasion, especially if you're using something like Iron Reflexes to combine those both into armor. And then 66, which is a healthy amount of life on a chest piece. Healthy amount of life. That makes this a pretty reasonably strong defensive piece. But let's look at some of the interesting ones. Minus 60% to lightning resist. Minus resist. 60%, that's pretty huge in Merciless when you already have a big reductions in resist, but it's still possible to cap out resist despite that lightning resist. You just have to put a lot of effort into doing so. Now, on top of this, 40% of physical damage is taken as lightning damage, and now you're probably starting to connect the dots of how this unique works. Essentially, any physical damage you take is skimmed by 40% of that damage. Now, this is really significant because that means you're only taking 60% of all physical damage, and that makes armor much more effective. And as I said, if you're using Iron Reflexes with this, you're going to have a decent amount of armor as well. Now, the way that armor works in this game is that it scales up in effectiveness for smaller hits. It's better at taking smaller hits, like faster, smaller hits. So having all physical damage reduced by 40%, which is huge, is a really big deal because it's a much bigger reduction than just 40% because of the way armor scales. So it's really powerful. All you have to do is build around the fact that you have 60% reduced lightning resist. So the idea of this item is that you take extra lightning damage instead of physical damage, and then you take a lot of extra lightning damage from that because of the reduced resistances. But as I said, still possible to cap out that lightning resist, and this really, I can see what Chris was saying about redefining the way we think about endgame defense for a lot of builds. And essentially this is about, okay, instead of like trying to mitigate all physical damage that's coming at me, what can I do? I can convert this physical damage to something else, and then focus on reducing that something else. So raising your maximum resistances, capping out lightning resist, and then converting as much damage as possible to that lightning damage means you can effectively negate all of that extra damage that's coming through. Well, most of that extra damage that's coming through. So pretty powerful item, and I think one that will see some use. And Yeah, very, very strong and very interesting. I'm pretty keen to see this item in the game. I think it's really fantastic, unique. And then finally we have Ming's Heart, Amethyst Ring, Chaos Resist base item, and we have 42% Chaos Resist. Yes. No longer, if you're using this item, will you be a negative Chaos Resist in Merciless, like most builds. That is a huge amount of Chaos Resist on one item. The 11%, well, the 12% if you cap this out. And I don't know if this is a range either, but maybe this goes a little bit higher as well. But around 50-something odd Chaos Resist is a pretty big deal. That will take you out of negatives, basically. All you need to do is get a little bit more Chaos Resist on some other pieces of gear. And you're pretty much most of the way there to making Chaos a non-threat for you. So that's pretty cool. Now, 15% reduced maximum life and reduced maximum energy shield. Now, it's important to note that these are both reduced, not less. So essentially, this means that you can counteract the effect of this easily with 1 to 2 life or ES passes, or maybe 3. So basically, you can get 15% increased life on the passive tree, and you'll have no problems, or 15% increased maximum energy shield, and you'll have no problems. Now, this kind of... let's move on to the next step before I talk about how this will actually be used. Gain 20% of physical damage that you do as extra chaos damage. This is fantastic for Bear Trap and EK, and also most attacking builds as well, but specifically for those two spells are really good stuff. Now, the fact that you're also getting reduced maximum life, I think this is a really good item for low life EK builds, and it's going to be great for Bear Trap builds. It's going to be great for most EK builds, I think. 20% increased physical damage, essentially, as chaos damage. Now, the important thing to remember, you probably saw this in a recent, there was a patch recently that had a similar item, but chaos damage, there's very few resistances against this, and it can't be blocked by armor or anything like that, so it's essentially having 20% of unblockable damage. There's some mobs that do resist chaos, but very few actually do it, and it can't roll as an affix on rare or elite mobs, so very, very big damage increase that's essentially unblockable, and as I said, will work really well with low life builds and things like that as well. So another very powerful item. Overall, these are pretty cool stuff. I really like the synergy of both of these trap items. This is just a decent strength one, really buffing up the damage of some traps that you can't normally buff the damage of, and then this one, your Go Fast trap unique, pretty exciting stuff, and a very interesting item that does, I think, go some way towards redefining endgame defensive capabilities. And then a decently powerful item for a lot of physical damage builds. So pretty cool stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.